Naomi Carter walked into her father's multi-million-dollar company, but today she wasn't treated like the CEO's daughter. She was just another cleaner. Employees barely looked at her. Some scoffed, others whispered, and a few laughed right in her face. "Make sure you don't leave streaks on the windows," a manager sneered, not knowing he was talking to his future boss. For days, Naomi watched. She saw the lies, the laziness, the disrespect. Workers who sucked up to her father but acted like royalty when he wasn't around. And then, when the time was right, she revealed exactly who she was. You won't believe what happened next. Who do you think got fired first? Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from. And if you love stories where justice is served, hit that subscribe button. Naomi Carter gripped the mop handle, forcing herself to stay calm. The manager who had just sneered at her for leaving streaks on the windows had no idea who she really was. Just days ago, she had walked these same hallways dressed in designer clothes, sitting in high-profile meetings, watching her father, Marcus Carter, CEO of Carter Enterprises, run his company with discipline and vision. Now, she was dressed in an oversized janitor's uniform, her hair tucked under a cap, pushing a cleaning cart like she didn't belong. She had chosen to do this, but that didn't make it any easier. At 25 years old, Naomi was being trained to one day take over Carter Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar company built from the ground up by her father. But there was a problem. Her father had heard too many complaints about the company's culture. Employees pretended to work hard when executives were around, but behind closed doors, the truth was ugly. Naomi needed to see how deep the problem went, so she made a bold decision. She would go undercover as a janitor for a week to experience the company from the bottom. No fancy office, no private meetings, no one knowing who she was. Just a mop, a uniform, and the truth. The high-rise glass building stood tall in the heart of the city. From the outside, it looked perfect. Inside, it was a whole different world. Naomi observed everything. The executives in their tailored suits, fake smiles, and coffee-fueled conversations about efficiency. The managers who barely acknowledged lower-level staff. The janitors and assistants, people who actually kept the company running, being ignored and disrespected. It didn't take long for Naomi to see the real problem. People only worked when the CEO was watching. The moment he left, they became lazy, rude, and entitled. And now, they were mistreating their future boss. Within the first few hours, Naomi identified the worst offenders. Richard Saunders, the arrogant manager, middle-aged, overconfident, and dismissive, yells at employees but does nothing himself, acts powerful when the CEO isn't around. Lisa and Tom, the fake hard workers, act professional in front of executives, but gossip and slack off when unsupervised. Look down on janitors and lower-level employees, steal credit for others' work. Other employees, some were good people, just trying to survive in a bad system. But too many had bad attitudes. By lunchtime, Naomi had already been insulted twice. One employee knocked over her cleaning cart on purpose and laughed. A secretary complained loudly about the janitor smell as Naomi walked past. Richard, the manager, threw his coffee cup on the floor and barked, "Clean that up." Naomi stared at him, gripping the mop tighter. This was worse than she thought, but she stayed silent. She needed to see more, because soon they were all going to learn who she really was. Naomi stared at the spilled coffee on the floor, Richard's arrogant smirk burning into her memory. "Are you deaf?" he sneered. "I said clean it up." She could feel the stares from other employees, watching like it was some kind of power game. No one said a word. No one stopped him. Naomi slowly picked up the mop, reminding herself why she was here. This wasn't the time to react. Not yet. She dipped the mop into the bucket and cleaned the mess without a word. Richard chuckled. Thought so. Then he walked off, acting like he had won something. Naomi took a deep breath. He had no idea how wrong he was. Over the next few days, Naomi saw more than she ever expected. Lisa and Tom openly mocked janitors and interns. Why do they even hire these people? They're basically invisible. Employees slacked off, scrolling through social media and only pretending to work when a higher-up walked by. Some managers took credit for ideas from junior employees. The good workers were treated like nothing, while the lazy ones bullied their way to the top. Naomi was furious. This wasn't just a few bad employees. This was a culture of disrespect, and no one was holding them accountable. By the fourth day, Naomi's patience was running thin. She was cleaning a conference room when she overheard Lisa and Tom gossiping. "I heard the CEO's daughter is coming in next week," Lisa whispered. "Better start acting professional." Tom laughed. "Good thing she's not here now. Imagine if she saw how lazy Richard is. He only works when the boss is watching." Naomi smirked to herself. "Oh, I'm watching all right." Then Richard walked in. "You two, stop slacking." Lisa rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, you're the worst one here." Richard scoffed. "Doesn't matter. The CEO trusts me. That's why I run things around here." Naomi clenched her jaw. Enough. It was time for them to learn the truth. Before she exposed them, Naomi wanted to test one last thing. She noticed an older janitor, Michael, who had been working there for over 15 years. Michael was kind, hard-working, and respectful, but he was treated like nothing. Naomi approached him during lunch. "Hey, do you ever get a break?" she asked. Michael chuckled. "Breaks? Not in this place. People barely notice me unless something's dirty." Naomi's heart sank. He deserved better. She made a decision. Michael was going to be rewarded. But first, she needed to clean house. That afternoon, an email was sent out to all employees. Mandatory staff meeting tomorrow. CEO in attendance. The office buzzed with whispers. Why is the CEO coming in on such short notice? Something big is happening. Naomi smiled as she pushed her cleaning cart down the hall. Tomorrow, everything changes. The next morning, the entire office was buzzing. Employees whispered in the hallways, fixing their ties, and actually working for once. The email about the surprise staff meeting with the CEO had sent everyone into panic mode. Richard adjusted his expensive watch, glancing around. "This is probably just a routine check-in. No big deal," Lisa smirked. "Yeah, just pretend to be busy for an hour, and we'll be fine." Naomi, still dressed in her janitor's uniform, quietly pushed her cleaning cart into the conference room. Nobody noticed her, just like always. But today, that was about to change. At exactly 9 a.m., the double doors swung open. Marcus Carter, the CEO himself, walked in. The room fell into complete silence. Employees straightened up immediately, faking smiles and nodding respectfully. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. Sir, it's great to see you." Richard stepped forward, putting on his best fake charm. "Sir, everything has been running smoothly under my supervision. No issues at all." Naomi clenched her fists. "Liar." Her father nodded, scanning the room. His eyes briefly landed on Naomi, but he didn't react. He knew what was about to happen. "Before we begin," Marcus said, "there's someone I want to introduce to you all." He turned toward Naomi. "Naomi, would you come up here, please?" The employees frowned in confusion. Richard scoffed. "Why is the janitor—" Then Naomi stepped forward. She pulled off her cap, shook out her hair, and unzipped the janitor's uniform, revealing a sleek, professional dress underneath. The entire room gasped. Richard's face turned white. Lisa and Tom froze in horror. Naomi lifted her chin. Surprise. Naomi turned to face the room. "My name is Naomi Carter. I am the daughter of Marcus Carter, and one day I will be running this company." Murmurs spread across the room. "But for the past week," Naomi continued, "I have not been the CEO's daughter. I have been your janitor. I've watched how you treat people you think are beneath you. And what I saw," she shook her head, "it was disgusting." Lisa covered her mouth in shock. Tom looked like he wanted to disappear. Richard stepped forward, desperate. "Miss Carter, this is just a misunderstanding." "Really?" Naomi cut him off. "Because from what I saw, it seems like you only work when my father is watching. The rest of the time, you're yelling at people, dumping your messes on janitors, and treating your employees like garbage." Her words landed like a slap. Richard's jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "You know what's not fair," Naomi snapped. "Hard-working employees being treated like they don't matter. People like Michael, who have been here for years, getting ignored while you take long lunches and pretend you're important." Michael, the older janitor, looked up in shock. "You saw that?" he whispered. Naomi smiled. "I saw everything." Marcus Carter finally spoke. His voice was calm but firm. "Naomi, would you like to share your findings?" Naomi nodded and pulled out a folder full of notes. "In the past week, I have witnessed the following: employees slacking off when they think no one is watching, managers abusing their authority and treating lower-level workers unfairly, toxic employees gossiping, disrespecting staff, and creating a hostile work environment. And, worst of all, some of you have the audacity to pretend you care when my father walks into the room." The room stayed dead silent. Lisa, Tom, and Richard all looked at each other, panicking. Then Naomi pulled out a final list. She took a deep breath. "Some of you are about to be fired." She read the names one by one. Lisa and Tom, terminated immediately. "This company has no room for people who build their careers by tearing others down." Lisa gasped. "No, wait. You thought you were untouchable," Naomi said. "But you forgot one thing. I was watching." Tom slumped in his chair, defeated. Then Naomi turned to Richard. "As for you, Richard," she said, her voice sharp, "you have abused your position, mistreated employees, and failed as a leader." Richard's face turned red. "Wait, please, I can explain." "You don't need to," Naomi interrupted. "You're fired. Effective immediately." Security stepped forward. Richard looked around in shock, searching for sympathy. No one spoke up for him, because he had never stood up for anyone else. As he was escorted out, Naomi watched without an ounce of regret. This was justice. With the toxic employees gone, Naomi turned her attention to the people who deserved recognition. "Michael," she said, smiling, "you've been here for years, and you've done your job with nothing but kindness and dedication. That's what real leadership looks like." Michael's eyes widened. Naomi continued, "Starting today, you're getting a raise and a new position as head of facility management. You deserve it." Michael stumbled back, stunned. I don't know what to say." Naomi smiled. "Say yes." Tears welled up in his eyes. "Yes. Thank you, Miss Carter. Truly." Naomi turned back to the remaining employees. "This company will no longer reward laziness and fake leadership," she said. "From now on, we value people based on their character, not their titles." Some employees nodded, inspired. Others looked nervous. Good. They should be, because Naomi Carter wasn't just here to take over. She was here to change everything. The office was still in shock. Richard, Lisa, and Tom had just been fired on the spot. Naomi Carter had exposed everything, the laziness, the disrespect, the lies. Now, she was just getting started. Naomi scanned the room, watching as employees whispered nervously. Some looked relieved, others terrified. And then she dropped the final bombshell. Naomi pulled a remote control from her pocket and pointed it at the large screen in the conference room. With one click, a hidden camera video started playing. Gasps rippled through the room. There, on screen, was footage of Richard, Lisa, and Tom gossiping, slacking off, and mistreating employees. The entire office watched in horror as Richard laughed while tossing coffee onto the floor for Naomi to clean. Lisa's voice echoed through the speakers. Why do they even hire these janitors? They're basically invisible. Tom's voice followed. We don't even have to work hard. As long as we act busy when the CEO is around, we're safe. The room fell silent. Employees turned to each other, whispering. That's what they really thought of us? They treated people like trash behind closed doors. I can't believe I respected them. Richard, still standing near the exit, turned red with anger. This isn't fair, he shouted. You set us up? Naomi raised an eyebrow. Set you up? No, Richard. I gave you a chance to prove you were a decent leader. You failed. Lisa burst into tears. Please, Naomi, I was just joking. Tom shook his head. We didn't mean any harm. We were just blowing off steam. Naomi crossed her arms. You weren't joking when you ignored hard-working employees. You weren't joking when you made people feel worthless. She pointed to the screen. That's who you really are. And this company has no place for people like you. Security stepped forward again. Take them out, Naomi said. Richard and Tom were escorted out. Lisa, still sobbing, begged for another chance. But Naomi had seen enough. Lisa was gone too. For the first time since Naomi had gone undercover, the hard-working employees finally had the courage to speak. Michael, the janitor, cleared his throat. Thank you, Miss Carter. I never thought I'd see justice in this place. Other employees nodded. A young intern stood up. For months, I've watched managers take credit for my ideas while treating me like nothing. She looked at Naomi, determined. That ends today, right? Naomi smiled. Yes, it does. Naomi turned back to the employees. Here's the truth, she said, her voice steady. This company is full of talented people, but too many of you have been forced to work under bad leadership. That changes today. She clicked another button on the remote. A slide appeared on the screen. New workplace rules. Checkmark. Hard work will be rewarded. Toxic behavior will not be tolerated. All employees, no matter their title, deserve respect. Some employees smiled, others nodded in agreement. A few looked guilty, because they knew they needed to change. Then Naomi paused. Before we end this meeting, I have one more announcement. Everyone held their breath. Naomi turned to Michael. You've been working here for 15 years. You've done your job every day, with respect and dedication. You've been ignored, overlooked, and mistreated. Michael lowered his gaze. But no more. Naomi smiled. As of today, you are promoted to facility manager, and you're getting a raise. Michael's eyes widened. The entire room erupted in applause. Tears welled in Michael's eyes. Thank you, Miss Carter. I don't know what to say. Naomi smiled. Just keep being the incredible person you've always been. The meeting ended, but the change had just begun. Naomi's father, Marcus Carter, approached her. I'm proud of you, he said. Naomi looked around the office. The same people who had ignored her days ago now saw her as a leader. I'm just getting started, she replied. And she meant it, because this wasn't just about firing a few bad employees. This was about changing everything. Naomi Carter stood in the center of the conference room, watching as employees slowly filed out, whispering among themselves. The reality of what had just happened was sinking in. She had just fired some of the most toxic employees in the company. She had also just rewarded the most hard-working ones. Now, it was time to rebuild. Her father, Marcus Carter, walked up beside her, arms crossed. "You handled that well," Naomi sighed. "There's still more to do." Marcus nodded. "So, what's next?" Naomi turned, looking out at the office floor where employees sat in silence, processing everything. She knew what had to happen next. The next morning, Naomi sent an official company-wide memo. Subject: A new era for Carter Enterprises in it. She outlined the changes coming to the company. Respect for all employees, regardless of position. Hard work will be rewarded. Every employee will have an equal chance to grow. There was also one final warning. Toxic behavior will no longer be tolerated. Some employees felt relieved, others felt nervous, because they knew Naomi wasn't bluffing. Later that afternoon, Naomi walked into the break room, where a small group of employees were whispering. The moment they saw her, they froze. She recognized one of them, David, a senior staff member. He had been quiet during the meeting, but she had seen him laughing with Richard just a few days ago. David stood up, crossing his arms. "Look, Naomi, Miss Carter," he corrected himself quickly. "We get it. You're the boss now, but do you really think firing people will fix everything?" Naomi met his gaze, calm and unwavering. "But it's a start," David scoffed. "Some people are saying you went too far." Naomi tilted her head. "Do you agree?" David hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know. But what I do know is people are scared." Naomi softened slightly. "They should be. Not because I'm in charge, but because the old ways are gone. No more favoritism. No more pretending to work when my father is watching." The room stayed quiet. Then Naomi took a deep breath. "But here's the truth," she continued. "I don't want people to be scared. I want them to be better. That's why I'm giving everyone, yes, including you, a choice." She looked around the room. "Either adapt to the new culture of respect and fairness, or leave." David was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Fair enough." Naomi watched as the tension in the room eased. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for change. Not everyone in the office had been toxic. There were employees who had worked hard, treated others well, and never got the recognition they deserved. Naomi knew it was time to change that. At the next staff meeting, she announced something unexpected. New Employee Recognition Program. Each month, employees would be recognized and rewarded for their hard work, not just in performance, but in teamwork and respect. Michael, the janitor she had promoted, got the first official award. When she called his name, the room erupted in applause. Tears filled Michael's eyes. "I never thought I'd see the day," Naomi smiled. "It's long overdue." Meanwhile, outside of Carter Enterprises, things were falling apart for Richard. Word had spread quickly about his public firing. He tried to get another management job, but no company wanted to hire someone exposed for workplace toxicity. He reached out to old business connections, but many distanced themselves. Eventually, he had no choice but to take a lower-level position in a different company, one where he had to answer to a strict boss. For the first time, Richard was on the other side of power, and he hated it. But deep down, he knew he had no one to blame but himself. That evening, Naomi sat in her father's office. Marcus Carter looked at her, pride in his eyes. "You know, Naomi," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I always knew you were ready." But I wanted you to see the company for yourself." Naomi nodded. "And now I have." Her father smiled. "So, what did you learn?" Naomi exhaled. "That leadership isn't just about making money. It's about creating an environment where people actually want to work." Marcus nodded. "Exactly." Then he leaned forward. "So, what's next?" Naomi smiled. "Building a company that treats people right." And for the first time in a long time, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. In the following weeks, things at Carter Enterprises began to shift. Employees were working harder, not out of fear, but out of motivation. The toxic culture had started disappearing. New leaders emerged, ones who actually cared about their teams. It wasn't perfect. Change never happens overnight. But one thing was clear. Carter Enterprises would never be the same again. And it was all because one woman dared to see the truth. Naomi Carter sat in her office, looking out over the bustling company floor. Things had changed. Employees who once ignored their responsibilities were now focused and respectful. Hard-working staff, like Michael, were finally being recognized. This wasn't just a business anymore. It was a company built on fairness and respect. Her father, Marcus Carter, walked in. "You did well, Naomi," she smiled, reflecting on everything that had happened. The lies, the mistreatment, the change. "I didn't do it alone," she said. "The right people were always here. They just needed a leader who saw them." Marcus nodded. "And now they have one." Naomi turned back to her office window, watching as the company she helped rebuild thrived. This was just the beginning. What do you think? If your boss went undercover, would they be proud of what they found? Should more CEOs do this to test their employees? Let's talk in the comments. Your voice matters. And if you believe in fairness, respect, and standing up for what's right, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Because these stories, they need to be told. See you in the next one.